There's more where that came from. Always there is more.
All right then. I'm gonna let your new people find me. Have a safe trip. Where you say you off to again?
Now, before we start this video, I feel I need to explain just what exactly it is we're attempting to get to the bottom of, as I feel answering the simple question of who was the best soldier on the wire either doesn't do a lot of characters justice, or just completely eliminates them from involvement in this video, as the definition of the word soldier is a very limited term, and such doesn't necessarily apply to characters like Brother Mouzone, an individual hired by Avon, who comes down from New York City in an attempt to retake control of the towers.
And for muscle, he's saying he's sending us the best he can find. Brother Mouzone.
He's sending him, brother?
From New York?
A soldier is somebody who serves in an army, or to better contextualise this video, serves under a king. Brother Mouzone does neither. Sure, it may seem as if he serves under Avon for a period of time, however I can assure you such isn't the case. Mouzone works with Avon, never for him. So for the purpose of this video, him, as well as a few others, will label as soldiers of fortune, those whom aren't loyal to any one king, and will work under whoever they deem fit. The question of best soldier still stands, however with the inclusion of those you wouldn't necessarily deem to be such.
Don't matter who did what to who at this point. Fact is, we went to war, and now there ain't no going back. I mean, shit, it's what war is, you know? Once you in it, you in it.
Starting off with one of those soldiers of fortune, we'll first take a look at arguably the most underlooked player on the entire show, Slim Charles. Slim served under both Avon and Prop Joe, kings of the East and West Side, before taking the title for himself come the show's end. Something to note is the fact that he's the only soldier to ever do so, with the majority either dying too early, finding themselves in jail, or just simply never climbing the ranks.
I ain't making myself clear. The game ain't in me no more. None of it.
With all that being said, I don't actually believe Slim's accomplishment to be of much value, especially in the eyes of the king, as a good soldier isn't the soldier who's eventually going to take you over, rather it's the soldier who's going to do everything in his power to make sure that such a possibility never comes to fruition. Granted, Slim's intentions weren't such, as he never actually makes any moves against the king, direct or otherwise, and is actually rather loyal to both up until their downfall, an event in which he also had little to no effect on. Rather, he just plays the game to the best of his ability, and is somewhat lucky with how the dominoes fall around him. Sure, he may have made a decision or two which down the line turned out to benefit him, not rushing to take out Marlowe for example. However, my point still stands, which is that Slim, by definition, isn't one of the greatest soldiers. Rather, he's one of the greatest players. Dare I say he's a better politician than he is a soldier.
There go that motherfucker Nene, man. I say we take him.
We should wait for the call.
Man, we wait, he gonna get away, man. Didn't I say something about waiting for a fucking phone call?
And his feats on the street attest to such. Take for example the botched hit on Marlowe's crew that we just saw play out. Sure, you could argue it to not be Slim's fault, as it wasn't him who strayed away from the orders. However, if you're the general of an army, or the leader of a small platoon of troops, if the mission goes tits up, simply because of your troops' inability to follow orders, then surely some of the blame ought to be pinned onto you. And for those who want to argue that it isn't the general's responsibility to make sure that the troops he's forced to work with are highly trained, I would say to you that this is Baltimore, not the SAS. Barely anybody is going to be trained, and so you should be like Chris Paltrow and take the initiative so to make sure that's no longer the case, as at the end of the day, it isn't the individual soldiers who the king's gonna blame.
Look, you two niggas get on it, man, and get it right.
Slim also has one major defect working against him, that being his size, which is sometimes going to make it more difficult for him to carry out whatever his king wants carried out. Take for example the hit on Clay Davis. As stupid as that idea was, something Slim was rightly able to point out, him pulling off such a hit just wouldn't be possible, as Slim's just far too noticeable. He isn't going to be able to do much without a shitstorm of issues coming back to him and his king. Granted, most of the time secrecy isn't an issue. However, if you do eventually want somebody taken out in such style, Slim Charles just isn't an option, limiting what he's able to do as a soldier, and therefore limiting your success as a king. Now in all fairness, Slim does have his qualities as a soldier. He follows orders, is loyal up until the end, and other than a few instances, is never really in any danger. However, he's just a far better player than he is a soldier. Sure, he'd be an asset to your team, but if you were the king, and had to choose between him and others soon to be mentioned in this video, there isn't really going to be much of an argument. Now that isn't to slander the great Slim Charles, as he did play the game far better than anybody I'm about to analyse, but in order for him to become a king, he's first had to fail as a soldier.
No need for that. You ain't come to see me off.
Turning to another soldier of fortune, I want to take a look at an individual who had the entirety of the West Side and East Side shook alike. Somebody whose name struck unimaginable fear into those we considered kings. And that individual is no other than Brother Mouzone.
You don't think I'm gonna send any of my people up against brother? Shit. That nigga got more bodies on him than a Chinese cemetery.
Mouzone is a very complicated character, as he's somebody who many fans deem too unrealistic for the setting. However, I can assure you that people like this did in fact exist in real life, especially in the communities depicted on The Wire, as Mouzone is a member of what was once known as the Nation of Islam, an organisation who, amongst many other things, profited from patrolling rough urban areas like the ones seen on The Wire. However, Mouzone was something more, something the Nation of Islam couldn't condone, or at least pretended like they didn't. To put it into simpler terms, Mouzone was also a hired killer, somebody who the gangs of Baltimore, amongst many other major cities across America, could hire to come in and solve their issues. And at this, Mouzone was flawless, hence why we see Avon and Prop Joe so shook whenever just his name is brought up in conversation.
We gotta hit right back, make a statement, but Mouzone not saying who did that shit.
You asked him who it was?
Yeah, I asked him.
Why? Why what? How you gonna ask a soldier like Mouzone a question like that? Either he gonna say or he gonna go and work it out. Either way, you ain't got to be asking him shit.
Now, for those who may want to argue that Mouzone's actions on the street don't necessarily attest to such, as Brother doesn't really do much to justify the fear he evokes onto others. Unlike, say, a Chris Paltrow, for example, who many are afraid of because of what he does during his time on the show. I would simply say that Brother doesn't need to, as he isn't a character who needs to be built up through his actions. Rather, he's a character who's already been built up via the word of other dangerous men around him. We'll trust that nobody in Joe's crew is capable of taking Brother out, simply because somebody as knowledgeable as Joe tells us so. We'll trust that Avon isn't capable of warring with Brother, simply because he's willing to give up a lifelong friend in Stringer, so to not have Brother as an enemy, and lose out on all the privileges that come with such. Which surely begs the question, is Brother Mouzone the answer to the title of this video? Is Brother the greatest soldier on the wire? He was the only person capable of ever scaring Avon. He managed to pull off a hit deemed nigh impossible for anybody a part of the Stanfield crew, was able to evade the police during the entirety of his time in Baltimore, and was most importantly able to complete the task he was originally paid to complete. And yet despite all this, the answer is no. Sure, he's up there. However, he doesn't take that number 1 spot, for the exact same reason as to why he arguably takes a number 2 spot. Reputation, and the word of others.
I was there, but I didn't kill him. Vondas did. He cut his throat.
Now you're probably all wondering just whether or not Vondas can really be included in this list given the video's title, as he doesn't by definition fall into the category of a typical soldier. He deals with those who should be dealing with the king, he's not so often in the field, and he very rarely gets his hands dirty. To put it plainly, he's more of a Stringer Bell than he is a Chris Paltrow. However, if you rewatch the show, you'll find such to not necessarily be the case, as Vondas is sort of both. He'll make deals without his king present, very similar to Stringer. However, he'll also cut a man's throat, very similar to Chris Paltrow. It all just boils down to how the Greek's operation is run, as the Greek isn't really going to be in need of a Chris Paltrow or a Wee-Bey too often, as very rarely do the men on the street make such a fuck up, that the Greek needs to send a specialist to go clean it up. However, when he does, he'll send Vondas.
Relax. I gave you my word.
All I'm essentially saying is that Vondas is able to play the role of Stringer Bell far more often than he is Chris Paltrow. The business is run in such a way in which it doesn't require the constant dropping of bodies, and so a man like Vondas is able to play the role of middleman more than most soldiers. Yet he's still going to get his hands dirty when shit hits the fan, and so his inclusion in this video, I feel, is more than justified. Now, to provide context to my point made earlier, that being that Vondas is a man who's built up through his reputation, there aren't actually many scenes which back my point. However, the reason I bring it up is that unlike Brother Mouzone, it isn't so much what people say that adds to his reputation, rather it's the position he's in that buffs it up, as you don't become second in command to an international drug lord if you aren't capable of handling issues as well as gangsters, far beyond the level of the guys we see running Baltimore.
You know, because Joe says. And because I say.
And you trust your people like that?
I talk to my driver. I look into his soul.
To put it bluntly, the security guard of the president is going to be of a far higher quality than the security guard of the mayor, regardless of the fact that we may have seen the mayor's security in action more times than we have the president's. Sometimes just a person's position is capable of speaking louder than another person's actions. In the eyes of the king, Vondas is without question the best soldier. The Greek is never in any danger, and all the problems he needs solved, Vondas solves without much issue. And come the end of the show, the Greek is ultimately the last king standing. Nobody knows his name, or even what he looks like. And for that, he has Vondas to thank.
I'm thinking there's nothing to be done. at this point. What he says, he says.
He knows my name, but my name is not my name. And you? To them, you're only the Greek.
And of course, I'm not even Greek.
Aside from Chris and Wee-Bey, who were already discussed in my second most recent video, there isn't any other soldier I feel really compares to those mentioned today. However, if you're able to think of somebody I haven't, please drop me a comment below explaining why you believe said soldier to be considered the best, or at least up there in the rankings.